You know, since I started my own feudal Japan-inspired faction, it feels like I've opened an alternate timeline where my mind turns any model I look at into a more badass ninja or samurai version of that mini. So I figured let's just embrace this new superpower and make the ultimate ninja miniature with my mind. I recently made a video where I started my own samurai faction, and I had so much fun kit bashing and painting that model. And since then, I've been constantly on the lookout for models or bits that would fit into this faction. After all, I've got a lot more characters to flesh out this warband. I ended up finding myself revisiting many of the gorgeous Eastern-themed Kingdom Death monster models for inspiration. And then I thought, a great model is a great model, isn't it? So why should I conform myself from making this warband comprised of just models of a single manufacturer? And that's when my friend Adam over at Kingdom Death had the idea of me adding a brand new, never revealed model to my squad. One that will be on sale for the very first time on their massive Black Friday sale. This is Priestess Percival, the latest model in their line of People of the Sun. Each of these models lean into a traditional Eastern aesthetic, and it is a perfect fit for my faction. She's going to be a great balance to my first, more brutish samurai with her nimble and lithe, but no less deadly pose. She's captured shrugging off her nondescript overcoat, and this pose has so much life and storytelling. I'm excited to be the first person to paint her. We'll start the paint job by establishing some colors and light with an airbrush. Now, the main reason I do this is because it speeds up the first processes of painting so I can get to the stuff that I enjoy most. And if I get to that fun stuff quicker, I'm just going to enjoy the painting process more. You can certainly do this step with a big brush and thinned paint, but I wanted to create two light sources on this piece. One fainter blue glow from the lantern I placed on her base, and a main warm light source coming from above and to her right. And establishing light angles with an airbrush is much easier than with a regular brush. Now, I'm no surgeon with an airbrush, but by slowly building up some tones with our light angles in mind, and then reestablishing our highlights with white ink, then repeating this process, you can have a crazy amount of color depth and understanding the light angles in very little time. You know, I'm just realizing now that this is actually a really timely collaboration with Kingdom Death Monster, actually for two reasons. First of all, their annual Black Friday sale is just about to drop on their website, and it is literally the biggest sale in all of miniatures, at least to me. So it's a great time to pick up Princess Percival here if you like this model, but also if you wanted to try out their actual core game of Kingdom Death Monster, any of the expansions, or any individual models, this is the time for the greatest discount. And maybe I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here. If you haven't heard of Kingdom Death Monster before, it's a boutique brand, and they have been taking their time improving and releasing the best things they possibly can. If you're anything like me, you can struggle with waiting, but if I'm gonna wait, it's for something of high quality from a company that thanks us for our patience. They also handle their own distribution, which allows them the flexibility to have an all-out insane Black Friday sale each year. So for one day, it's usually about 50% off everything in their entire range. So you're going to want to make sure you check out their web store on Black Friday because you just get one day for this sale. I'll put a link down in the description below so you can open it up in a new tab and have that saved as a reminder. The second reason why I'm glad we're partnering this month is because it actually marks the 15-year anniversary of Kingdom Death Monster. I didn't realize that it had been around that long, if I'm honest with you, but I think it's great that we have a breadth of gaming and miniature companies that not only have survived over the years, but have continued to improve on the quality of what they produce each year. So happy birthday, Kingdom Death. All right, let's get to the fun stuff, but let's not rush in too quickly because there is one very important factor we need to keep in mind as we're painting this model. Not only is she so different from our first samurai in the type of role she'll play in my force, but she's also a much different painting experience. My original samurai had a lot of angles, a lot of sharp details, a lot of craggy and jagged features. Percival is the opposite. She's sculpted gracefully and softly. Now don't get me wrong, this model is equally, if not more so, sculpted with precision and exactitude, but we have to work with more curving in subtle volumes, and that requires a different approach to the painting. The colors I choose when painting this model won't be affected by this change, but how I apply them will. I need to build up volumes smoothly, only pushing the contrast in color on the few impactful edges. Female faces and skin are often sculpted with very few lines and details, meaning we've got to build up drama and highlight with our paint. I push the highlights in 3 key areas: the bridge of the nose, right below the eyes, and the forehead. Don't be afraid to go bold and very bright in these 3 areas. After all, if we don't create drama through brights and darks, we won't end up with a well-painted model. In order to maintain control over the subtleties in the skin, the key tool I'm going to be using is thin paint. I place the initial color with a dilution that's about 3 parts water and thinner to 1 part paint. This gets me some opacity that I can build up over multiple coats if I need to, but it won't be so strong with a single coat that it would take me a lot of time to fix if I make a mistake. From there, I thin the paint even more until it's about 5 parts water and thinner to 1 part paint. This is a medium glaze consistency. I pull the paint from outside our highlight up into it, or I'll make many small dots where the new highlight meets the color underneath to fuzz that transition. Now, I know what you're thinking. This seems like a long, arduous process, and there's no way you're going to get all your miniatures painted before you die if you paint like this. And that's a solid question, but I really do think that working with thinned paint and glazes gets a bad rap in terms of speed. Remember, we've already established colors prior to this process, so that greatly speeds up what we're doing here. If we were going directly over pure black primer and glazing up to a new color, yeah, that would take forever. And honestly, this is not taking me long at all because I'm just making small jumps. And getting practice with smooth, thinned coats of paint is one of the best uses of your time to improve as a miniature painter. It allows you to make quick transitions and smooth out little areas really quickly as you notice them during your paint job. I love the attention to detail on this sculpt, like the fact that her hair is positioned in a way that looks like she just dropped from a great height onto this pillar and it's not yet fallen down to her shoulders. For painting the hair, I'm just focusing on pushing the highlights towards the halo that's just above her face. This is where we want our viewer to focus, so we'll keep the rest of the highlights around the hair to a minimum. You know, earlier I talked about working with thinned paints, and I talked about how much water and thinner to use compared to paint, but I forgot to tell you which thinner I use. I've tried a buttload of different elixirs, potions, and alchemical mutagens over the years to make my paints thin down and apply smoothly without separating. And the one I turn to begrudgingly over all others is Lamian Medium by Citadel. And I say begrudgingly because this stuff, like everything Games Workshop sells, is pretty damn expensive for what it is, but it does work so amazingly well. I'm sure someone out there has reverse engineered the exact formula of this stuff, and they'll put it down in the comments section below if they want to share. I have found people's recipes of what's in this stuff and mix it up myself with artist mediums, and it's not the same. I don't know what they do to create this combination of smooth flow, slightly increased dry time, and without adding any cloudiness to the liquid or adding any weight or mass to the paint consistency, but every combination I've tried to use to replicate this stuff has fallen short. Today's video is brought to us by our friends at Into the AM, and today is an extra special one. You see, I've been working with them on an extra special Ninjan shirt design, and today it's finally on sale. I wanted a design that had a strong Japanese architectural feel mashed up with some powerful cyberpunk colors. And it was awesome working with Barrett, the artist for this design, because he was able to take my designs and sketches and come up with a bunch of really cool ideas. It reminded me why I love working with Into the AM so much. They take so much care on the quality and craftsmanship on each step of the process. And of course, we had to fit our little red hooded ninja onto the design, but I didn't want him to overtake the entire piece. And what better time to release the Into the AM meets Ninja collaboration than Black Friday, because they have their amazing Black Friday sale going on right now. You can pick up this shirt as well as anything else that tickles your fancy at their lowest prices of the year. And each sale of the shirt does support me, so if you wanted to support the channel as well as pick up some sweet t-shirts, hoodies, flannels, and so much more, make sure you check out the link down in the video description. I keep at it with this thinned paint all around the various cloth elements of the figure, starting with a base coat that doesn't go all the way back into the deepest shadows, and then building up off of that with more thinned glazes. Now in general, you don't want to glaze with bright colors that have a lot of white in that color's mixture. They tend not to turn out very well, but you can add a lot of color depth and really interesting transitions to new colors with these glaze layers in just a minute or two as you build up one or two, letting them dry between each layer. In some areas, I don't put on many coats at all, preferring to show more of that color depth underneath that we're glazing on top of, instead of pushing to full opacity for those brighter areas. In the areas I want in full view of our main light source, however, I do push farther and give the indication of the true color of that material. Throughout this entire painting process, for all the upward facing surfaces that are hitting our main light, I'm using the same two colors as my highlight colors, a sunny skin tone and an ice yellow. There's a lot of brands that make a version of these colors, but as I keep these consistent across every single surface, it feels like the entire model is under that same warm light. While this model has many subtle surfaces to paint, and we do want to pay homage to the keen sculpting of details on her anatomy, like the way her right arm is angled to lean against her thigh just as it touches the ground, we also have some lovely contrast in the sharp, angular, metallic armor and weapon she wields. I really enjoy models that have a nice variation in the kinds of textures and surfaces on them. It keeps it from getting too tedious or boring as I make my way through the model. We're going to need sharp, bright shine on her shoulder armor and her amulet around her neck, and we don't need a lot of colors to do so. I'll be using a few colors from Flamion's non-metallic metal gold set from Pro Acryl, and they do the job incredibly easily. I use slightly thicker paint here as I want big jumps in brightness over very small areas, but I do make sure that I wick off most of the paint on a paper towel from my brush before I ever touch the model to ensure I get a clean, crisp line over those tiny edging details. I've got to make a decision on how to paint this sword, and I think the approach is to not make it too bright and shiny like we do on the gold, because it's actually behind her head. It's not going to gather as much light, and we don't want it to pull away too much attention from her face. I again use thin paint to smooth out our layers, but this time I use a bunch of scratchy lines from different directions to build up these glazes. This way we can build up the shine and leave behind very faint texture while still smoothing out our blends. And here's a great example of how using these same highlight colors really influences the surface. We started with a grayish blue for the sword, but as we're building up and adding more of the orange and yellow, you can see the warm light that's coming from the sun above reflecting off of the blade. Now's about the time when I'm painting a model where I rush through the last few details just to finish it up because all the fun parts are done. But on this one, not so fast. There's actually a pretty satisfying and easy way to put a cherry on top of our Percival paint job here, but first we need to define a few details on the pillar she's perched upon. I just mixed a grayish brown for this using whatever colors were already on my palette, if I'm being honest with you, but from there we just thinned down some off-white paints and let that flow into the recesses of our lantern. And now that we've defined some of the details on our terrain and shown that blue light source, it's time to bring back some more color. Many people call this tinting, but it's very similar to the really thin paint work that we've been doing before. I take the same blue that I started with at the very beginning of our paint job, and I thin it way down with water. I place this on the lantern and a few of the downward facing surfaces of Percival herself that I want to punch up that blue just a touch. For all the warm areas, I use my tried and true Casandora yellow shade paint by Games Workshop, and I thin it down about 7 parts water to 1 part wash. I lightly put a layer of this on all of the areas touched by our main light source. This pulls all of our colors together smoothly in one final step and reinforces our warm really nicely. But it's extremely important that for both of these steps, the orange and the blue, that you thin both of these inks or washes down incredibly with water. You do not want to turn all of your hard work into a suntan booth looking mess. And with that, our lone samurai now has a second warrior to join the squad. And hopefully more will join them soon. This kind of paint job is really one of my favorites to do. If you gave me one day a beautifully sculpted and manufactured model and let me paint it however I wanted, this is honestly what I would do. It doesn't take me 50 hours. Heck, it doesn't even take me 10 hours to do. I feel like I'm making good progress somewhat quickly. I get to work my way around the model with a bunch of interesting surfaces, and I'm proud of the smoothness and impactful final look. She's got that same rich red, the same gold, and the desaturated green in her overcoat as our first model without it feeling too over the top matchy-matchy. I'm really happy with her because I enjoy painting in this style. I enjoy seeing this faction fleshed out, and I really want to jump into another Kingdom Death model painted in the same style right after I finish this one, which I think is a good feeling. Anytime you finish a model and you're excited for the next one, it's been a good day. A big thank you for hanging out with me today, and an even bigger thank you for all of your support by subscribing, by liking the video, by using the links down below to pick up your hobby gear and models at a discount that support me, by picking up the brand new Ninjon Into the AM exclusive shirt. You make these videos possible, and they allow me to keep pumping them out for free on YouTube every Friday. And I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you the actual secret to becoming a true ninja yourself, and that is, of course, joining us over on the Ninjon Patreon. We've got a wonderful dojo over there where you can hang out on Discord, as well as a bunch of other fun rewards you get as a thank you for joining me, like my every Wednesday behind the scenes vlog. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to go find another model to build or kit bash to join the faction. Speaking of which, I realize I still haven't come up with a name for the faction yet, so help me out with that one. I'm going to see you back here next week with another new video. Just make sure that sometime between now and then, you find time in your day to slay the gray.